Sweet, we're live, and the Jazz won was like double sweet. I don't know. That was a good game. Like I feel like for a little bit in the middle, it got boring, just from a basketball excitement standpoint. But the Jazz pulled it out. Good news there. And really, like I don't know what was going on in the second half. Like especially when the Jazz let the Grizzlies on that run. They gave up a ton of offensive rebounds, and that's what look at the team stats here. Where is that? There it is. The Jazz had 7 offensive rebounds, which I think like 3 or 4 of those were in the first quarter. And then the Grizzlies had 16 offensive rebounds. That is what because there were some plays where the Grizzlies had 3 or 4 chances to score. And the Jazz defense was good enough that they stopped on some of those times. They stopped all 3 or 4 of them, which is awesome. But still, that's a lot of extra opportunities, extra shots that the Grizzlies had. And with those offensive rebounds and a couple extra turnovers that the Jazz gave up, the Grizzlies had 19 more field goal attempts than the Jazz, which is insane. Normally, if you see a teammate take almost 20 more shots than the other team, that's a pretty good indicator that the team who took that many more shots is going to win. In this case, the Jazz were just hitting their shots whenever they did get a shot up, and they were taking a lot more threes, and they made 10 more free throws. They were getting to the line a lot more as well. So efficiency of the Jazz in tonight's game is really what pulled it out for them, even with some sloppy rebounding and just giving up too many extra possessions to the Grizzlies. The Jazz won, though. They played awesome. Mitchell was huge for them. It's not like he had a month good. When he was out, the Jazz were struggling, is what I noticed. He did not have the best plus-minus. I believe Conley had the best plus-minus for the Jazz, which Conley also had a monster game. But if we can see that kind of play from Conley and Mitchell and Gobert night in, night out, then we're going to have with the starting lineup or off their bench to come in and bring a little spark. It's going to be tough to beat this team if that's the kind of play that we're getting out of our 3 main players every game. So that's kind of my quick rundown what I saw in the game. I will do I like to run through the stats because I'm a little bit of a nerd. So I'll run through the team stats really quick. Just kind of point out I ran through a couple of them for you guys. So I'll finish that up, go over to the box score, and then I'll hop into the comments really quick. And however many comments there are, I'll go until then or until I fall asleep. So if you want to keep this long, keep commenting. If you're tired and want to end it, don't comment or feel free to have. I talked about the rebounds, which was a huge thing, and the extra shots that the Grizzlies took, which were like big differences. And if the if Jazz defense wasn't as good as it was, or some of the Grizzlies players were a little bit more on tonight, this could have been a different game. But let's also look at the Jazz efficiency. The Jazz shot 40 for 81, so they were really darn close to 50% from the field. 19 for 43 from the 3, so as a team, they were 44% from the 3, which that's like if you're a player and shoot that, obviously, this is just one game, but if you shoot that as a player for the season, you're one of the best players in the NBA at 3-point shooting, if not the best any given season. Free throws, they took 27, hit 22, so above 80%, that's where you want to see your team. Above 80% from the free throw line as a team is perfect. And everything else, it kind of got beat up a little bit, except for blocks, obviously. I believe Gobert had 4. The team had 7. But the Jazz really didn't win out in any category except for efficiency. And which is good news because the Jazz haven't been, especially during that stretch of games where Mitchell and Conley were injured, the Jazz weren't a terribly efficient team. So it's good that now everyone's healthy. We're seeing that efficiency come back. Hopping over to the box score, Mitchell did lead all scorers tonight with 29 points, and he did that in 30 minutes. So I believe he still is on some sort of a minutes restriction, but obviously it's not that strict if they let him play 30 minutes. I don't think they were planning on having him play that many. It's just when the Grizzlies came back, they thought it was worth the risk to get him out there in order to secure that win. But 29 points in 30 minutes, that's about as efficient as you want from him. He was only 2 for 10. So, like, as far as shooting goes, though, it's not like he was terribly efficient. He was 2 for 10 from 3, 9 for 23 from the field. He did do great at getting to the line, and he got 9 of his points at the line. But let's give a shout out to Conley because he killed it. He had 27 points. I mentioned before he had the highest plus minus on the Jazz with a plus 16. He had 8 assists, 6 rebounds. But if you look at his shooting efficiency, 8 for 16 from the field. And of those 8 shots, 7 of them were threes. He was 7 for 10 from the 3-point line. I don't know. I've not seen Conley play or really shoot that many threes in a long time. I don't know if he had like he shoots threes, but he's not a 10 because they were dropping. Everyone else on the team except for Mitchell was pretty good from 3. Joe Ingles was off. Clarkson was like fine, I guess. But everyone else, we were looking good. Obviously, we shot a little over 44% as a team. So, and also Gobert. This seems like a normal, but he was huge. Every time he was in, it gave us, especially on the defensive end, it gave us a much better chance. Even though he was giving up a lot of offensive rebounds, he did a lot for this team. He pulled in 14 rebounds, which was huge because we didn't have a good rebounding night in this game. He had 15 points. He only missed 1 shot, and he had those 4 blocks, which some of those were clutch blocks. He had one right there at the end, which says we're probably going to win anyway, but the block kind of helped secure it. And shout out to on the Grizzlies, John Morant and Dylan Brooks. They're really what's making this. Both of them are what's making this a series and making me wonder if my prediction of Jazz in 5 is going to actually end up happening because they've been playing excellent. The good news for the Jazz is the Grizzlies got in foul trouble again, and I'm hoping we can rely on that throughout the series because the Grizzlies are going to have to be playing aggressive to keep up and like keep into the games. And Dylan Brooks is a very aggressive player. He's going to pick up a lot of fouls. So if we can get him fouled out most games, that will be huge. Like he fouled out tonight. We almost got Jaren Jackson Jr. fouled out as well. And this game, I don't know. What do you guys think about the refs this game? I know last game in game 2, I definitely had some complaints about the refs. I know you guys had complaints about the refs. So in this game, I felt like they were calling a lot of dinky calls, which I didn't like. But I felt like they were pretty consistent. And there weren't any calls where I thought was outrageous with how they were calling the game. I wish they didn't call as many of those like really soft calls, but a lot of them went towards the Jazz, and the Jazz learned how to use that to their advantage. So it worked out for the Jazz. I just don't like it when refs call like that. I don't know. Like, do you guys have any thoughts on the refs? I felt like they refed a fair game as far as being pretty equal and being pretty consistent with their calls. With that being said, those are my main thoughts on the game. That's what I saw. That's what the stats told me as well. So I don't know. I'm really excited that the Jazz took this win. I think that the Jazz will be able to pull off the second one. It won't be an easy game. I don't think there's going to be any easy games in these playoffs, but I think the Jazz are just they're a different tier than this Grizzlies team. Even though this Grizzlies team knows how to fight and stay in games and be scrappy, they're not even the same level of team. So that's why I think the Jazz will pull it off, especially with Mitchell in the game. But with that being said, I will hop into the chat, and yeah, we'll go from there until I decide to give up or until you guys I've run out of things to talk about. So Blue Diamond Gem, one of the first comments on here that wasn't like celebratory, says that the Jazz need to play better. And Sawyer says that we need to like be more consistent. What I'm noticing, and I don't know, this is eye test because I feel like the stats don't back this up as much. But when Mitchell and Gobert are off the floor, the Jazz aren't consistent, and that's when the Grizzlies start having runs and catching up and taking leads. And so I think everyone else on the Jazz needs to step up a little bit more. And if I know they can, like Ingles was 1 for 4 from 3. He was 23 minutes played, and he didn't really do anything. He had 1 assist and 3 points and 2 turnovers. It's not like he was playing awful. He just wasn't doing anything. So I know Ingles can perform better than that. Clarkson hit some great shots, but at the same time, he missed a lot of shots that he normally should have made. So we need to see that. Favors, I think we got what we wanted out of Favors. Niang was another player where like he's one of those players where we don't expect to see much out of him, but like I would like to see a little bit more than 3 points and no other stat. I think he played good defense, but I would like to see him make a bigger impact. And O'Neal played excellent in the first quarter. And then he was quiet the rest of the night. He hit 4 threes early in the game. He didn't score after that, and he pulled in a few rebounds, but it's not like he was making a huge impact on the game. So it's really like Conley, Mitchell, Gobert were the players that when they were in together, the Grizzlies really didn't stand a chance. And as we progress in the playoffs, because I fully expect us to win this first series, we're going to need more help from some of those players that I just named. And I said at the very beginning that as long as we get consistent play from Conley, Mitchell, Gobert, we can typically expect one other player on the team to really stand out and play better than we expect them to. But I don't think anyone really stood out tonight. And that's why it was a little tight, a little too close to comfort there at the end. And then swinging the pendulum the other way, we were just talking about how the Jazz need to improve. Goku-san says that the Jazz want to chip a monster team. And it's really interesting because I do feel like they were bipolar. Like this game was a little bit bipolar. I do think overall there's more positives than negatives. Obviously, that rebound thing is something the Jazz need to figure out. That's going to be a huge hindrance to them, especially if that continues into the playoffs. But you did see how they could fight. You did see the Jazz come up big. That when it came down to that pressure and it was late in the game, they were down by 2. The Jazz came in very cool and just went on a run and figured that out. Obviously, they're a much better team than the Grizzlies, but it's kind of what you expect out of a top seed who has a chance to go win a championship. So I saw good things both ways. The good news is I think the bad things that I saw aren't going to take months and months to iron out. I think those are things that they can make small adjustments and they can implement them easy. The good things, those are the things that take a lot of time to figure out and the things that a lot of other teams don't have. So I am hopeful with the Jazz. I think they'll go far. But if they play like this every night for the rest of the playoffs, they're not going to make it to the championship is really what it comes down to. And Sorry did bring up Mark Eaton, which that's sad. If you haven't heard, I don't know all the details, and if you don't know, Mark Eaton was a center for the Jazz back in the 90s. He really anchored their defense, kind of like a Rudy Gobert character today. Didn't score much, but was an awesome defending center. And he was in a bike accident and He did not make it out of it, so that's sad for the Jazz. That's sad for Mark Eaton and his family. So that was sad news, but now's a good time. Like if you don't know who Mark Eaton is, or haven't had much time to watch him or know about him, like go look into him because he was a big part of Jazz history. Cool. Nick says, "Quiet that crowd down, lol." That I liked that crowd. Like obviously it was nothing like Vivint, but I feel like that's part of the playoff energy, and for me as a fan, it's kind of fun seeing the team that I'm rooting for play in adversity like that with loud fans. And even though it's a much smaller crowd than what Vivint has, those fans really got into it, and they made their impact, especially down in the fourth quarter. So especially as the playoffs go on and crowds get bigger and bigger, we're going to have to see the Jazz play with some much bigger crowds. But and with that, like naturally it's going to be quieter. It got loud there for a second, but when the Jazz took that lead, it was pretty much silent in the arena, which was kind of cool to see as your team takes the victory and the opposing crowd just isn't into it anymore. And sorry, so this is kind of stepping away from the Jazz, but Sorry says I was surprised to see the Heat get swept. Yeah, me too. I thought the Bucks were going to win it. I knew the Heat had a chance of the upset because the Heat are a good team. And I think I predicted that series to go to 6 or maybe even 7. I thought it was going to be a tight series. I watched the first game of the Bucks Heat, and the Bucks played awful, and they just got bailed out by a good shot by Chris Middleton right at the end. He couldn't buy a bucket. I don't know. Giannis played awful in that first game, so I saw that and I was like, and my bet is that the Bucks have the best chance of beating the Nets in the East. And so I was rooting for the Bucks, but after watching that game one, I thought that even though the Bucks won, I thought the Heat were going to come in and take the series. But the Bucks have killed it since then. So taking this momentum, I'm hoping they can come and they can't beat the Nets. I'm hoping they can beat them up and make it a tough series for them. So DW says, I agree, pretty fairly called game. I don't like that soft 3-point foul stuff. Yeah, that's what was bugging me too. I agree with you that I think it was a pretty fairly called game. I don't think it was tilted. I feel like the Jazz got more benefit out of it just because of they were able to figure it out, and their play style was able to take advantage of those soft calls. But I hate and this one helped the Jazz out, but Dillon Brooks was guarding Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell gets screened by Gobert. Dillon Brooks goes over the screen, but Donovan Mitchell shoots like immediately as he steps around the screen, which when you do that, you're pretty much trying to draw a foul, which is fine. Like that's not an issue. Getting to the free throw line is a huge part of winning basketball games. Dillon Brooks is an excellent defender, and in this, like he was able to stop, and he made he brushed Donovan Mitchell on the shot. He definitely didn't give much space. I feel like that I feel like that's okay. I wouldn't want that kind of stuff to be called. I think it's I don't think it really messed up Donovan Mitchell's shot more than a good contest would. So I didn't like that call. The Jazz got the call and made free throws and it helped us in the end. So I'll take it, but I wish that kind of stuff, like those kind of dinky little fouls, weren't called. So Nick Reeder says, would you rather play the Clippers or the Mavericks in the second round? I don't know. Probably the Mavericks, but I kind of want to see the whole, and obviously by the time the whole series is played out, it wouldn't really matter what I preferred, because whoever wins that series is going to play the Jazz. But the Clippers, they weren't playing good games 1 and 2. They weren't playing good the first quarter or two of Game 3, but then they pulled it together in Game 3. So a Clippers team that has it pulled together, I think, is one of the scariest matchups for the Jazz, because the Clippers are one of the only other teams in the NBA who are as deep as the Jazz are. And so if the Clippers can pull everything together, that's a very scary team, and it will kind of negate a lot of the Jazz, a lot of their strong points, especially with how many good perimeter defenders the Clippers have. So I'll say that I'd rather play the Mavs, because the Mavericks, they don't have strong defense. Like, their defense is fine. It's not like it's going to be easy to score on them every single possession. Obviously, they have Luka, who he's terrifying. And in the playoffs, they have a lot of players like Tim Hardaway Jr. who have been stepping up. But I don't anticipate the Mavs to have their full roster stepping up and playing like they are against the Clippers for the entire playoffs. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a good player. He's not the kind of player who you can expect 20 points a game throughout an entire playoff run from. So I would anticipate if we played the Mavericks, it would be a much easier series. It'd be easier for the Jazz to run their offense without much of a headache or hassle. And on defense, you'd have to give up 40-point games to Luka, but you're going to bank on that Gobert will at least mess up some of those shots, and that not everyone else will be playing well. And obviously Porzingis is not anything. That's a little bit of a stretch, but he's not been what you'd expect out of a max contract player, and I don't anticipate him to do more of that in the second round, like pick that up. So that's my very long explanation to, I think the Mavs are a better fit, a better matchup for the Jazz. Nick said, did I go to game 2? I did not. Nate, who is my partner on the channel, he did go to game 2. So I'm pretty sure he's doing game 4. Like, he's traveling right now, so he might not be back in time for everything for game 4, but I think that's the plan. So I'm guessing he'll talk about some insights that he has from game 2 in that post game stream afterwards. Source says the Knicks have good fans, but they are mean. Honestly, right now, I feel like all the fans are mean. It's playoffs, emotions are high, and for a lot of fans, this is like their first time being back in the stadium for a long time. So that's why we're seeing a lot of like fans getting banned and fans doing stupid stuff all around the league. We saw that with the few Jazz fans got banned. There was some heat with some Celtics fans. The Philly fans like dumped popcorn on Westbrook. So I think we're going to see that. We might have, especially in the championship, especially if it's like Philadelphia and Utah, if stadiums are like full capacity again by that point, that might be one of the most intense stadium environments in a long, long time, just because of the history of how long it's been before we had a full stadium, and then the emotions of the Sixers haven't been in the championship for a very long time. The Jazz haven't been in the championship for a very long time. So I think that, like, from storyline and from like what could come out of that series, that would be one of the most exciting series we could see out of these playoffs in the finals. Sweet. Well, I'll rant for a couple more minutes in case you guys have more things to talk about, more questions, more what's the word? Like topics that you want to talk about, bring up, just Jazz or NBA in general, because looks like the chat is kind of run down to nothing. But I don't know, like, watching this game, if you just kind of joined, there's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives to take away from this game for the Jazz. And I think that the positives kind of outweigh the negatives, this game made me a little more confident in the Jazz, and this might just be because we won, and you're a little bit like drunk on victory after a win, so you don't always see things super clearly. But from this, I think I'm more confident in the Jazz. My prediction from the beginning with this, and when I made this prediction, I was assuming Mitchell was going to play game one. But my prediction for the beginning was 5 games. After game one, after the first 2 games, I decided to stick with that prediction, not alter it, because I still think that even though these are going to be tough games, gritty games, and the Jazz will have to fight for every victory, I still think the Jazz will have what it takes to win out. And after watching this game, even with all the slip-ups that we had, rebounding and turnovers and crap, I'm still confident that this team is just a step above the Grizzlies and will be able to pull out every other win, assuming there aren't any major injuries. With that, okay, Sawyer had a comment. So are you saying that you think Ilyasova should be played more in the playoffs? I think he could be good. I like Ilyasova. I like what he brings to a team. I don't like him having a ton of minutes. And the tough thing is there's so many other players that you could play that, because I feel like Ilyasova could come in and hit a couple threes, but I feel like he's going to be a little bit of a defensive liability. He's not going to help us on rebounding a ton. I'm sure he'll be better than if you put an Oni in there, obviously, but and just from what we saw from him in the season, I don't think he really I don't think he did enough to really fit into the system. So I'm not expecting to see Ilyasova much, if at all, these playoffs. If the Jazz have a blowout victory in the fourth quarter, I think that's when we'll see him. I think his skill set, he can bring a lot to the table, but just because he's coming to the Jazz after he hasn't played for, I don't know, a season and a half, and then he didn't really play enough with Jazz to really get into the system, that I don't want to experiment too much with him with playoff lineups at this point. If we saw a lot more from him from the season, then I would love to see that, but I just don't think he's playoff basketball ready from what I've seen. But I do agree with you. If he had more time with the Jazz and he fit into everything, I think there'd be a lot that he could bring to the table. But yeah, I'll actually close this off now, the stream. But if you have more comments, leave them in the comment section. I'll get to them. Great win for the Jazz. I'm excited for Game 4. Before we played the Grizzlies, I said this was going to be the best case scenario. I don't think I knew as much about the Grizzlies then as I do now. Obviously, watching them play these 3 games, I've learned a lot more about their roster, and I think they've really overachieved and performed better than what even the Grizzlies fans would expect with some of their players. So I'm excited to see this. I think the Grizzlies are going to provide good basketball, even if the Jazz do win out. They're going to be entertaining basketball games, and they're going to challenge the Jazz. So I'm excited to watch the rest of the series. My prediction is Jazz in 5. When I end the stream, leave your prediction. Do you think the Jazz will win out, or what do you think is going to happen there? But thanks for joining me tonight, guys. It's been fun. And if you're a Jazz fan, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, because that way you can hop on these streams right as we launch them, right as we go live, because we have a stream after every single Jazz game. I think I missed one because I just flew back from Florida and then I fell asleep. So other than that, we hit every other Jazz game this season. So make sure to subscribe if you're a Jazz fan. Thanks again, guys.